Lord, give me the tongue of the learned, that I may know what I ought to say. And if there be any word good for the use of edifying, give it, that thou mayest minister grace unto the hearers. Grant that I may speak boldly. I open my mouth wide, O Lord. Do thou fill it, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. This is called the Paschal Troparion, a traditional hymn in the Orthodox Church sung on Easter. This short but mighty phrase speaks to Christ's redemption of what we gave him. We gave him death, and he used that death to conquer death. And by that death, he gives us life. It seems like a given, but it is one that is hard to grasp. The only way to receive life is to first lack it. Until we are dead, we cannot receive life. We cannot receive life because we are already convinced that we have one, because we are living. So it is only in death that we can truly become aware of our lack of life. Spiritually, at the moment of our baptism, we did indeed die and were born anew. The problem is that there was no dramatic death scene as the water was poured over our heads. There was no heart monitor flatline. There was no final dramatic monologue. There was no rosebud, followed by the hand drop and the snow globe. In fact, I don't even think the heart skipped a beat. Just hopefully warm water, casually poured on your head, and a hanky to dry it up afterward. But make no mistake, when you were baptized, you died and were reborn before the hanky even hit your head. And it is fitting because this is the exact reverse of what happened to Adam and Eve the moment they ate of the apple and died. They had life and lost it. We had death and gained life. This is what Paul is trying to convince the Colossians. He is trying to catch them up to their spiritual reality. They have been given the life of Christ once they died in baptism. They lacked life, and he gave it to them. The problem is that they kept on living. They exhaled to the spiritual death and inhaled the spiritual life, but to their eyes, it still looked the same. They had not yet received their spiritual eyes. Their eyes sent messages to their brains and said, "We are still not in heaven." St. Paul tells them that this is because they are still focusing on dead things. To the dead, all things look dead. But St. Paul tells them to stop focusing on dead things and start looking to those that live. He says, if you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is. Now, to set one's mind on things that are above does not mean to solely think about heaven, but to orient one's life in devotion to God rather than to self or to the world. Think about it this way. If we die and are buried 6 feet underground, if we were to all of a sudden regain life, all we would see when we look around is death and dirt. But if we look up, we would see the hand of the one who has already conquered death, reaching down to lift us up. Only then can we see life. Life is where Christ is. Once we are where he is, life rather than death, only then can we be oriented as he is. This is the key to the spiritual life, leaving the life of the dead behind and grabbing a hold of the life offered by Christ. It is only when we realize that we are dead, that we recognize that we need life. And when we take a hold of life, we cannot bring death with us. We must leave it behind. And this is the hard part, leaving death where it belongs. When I go on trips, I'm an overpacker. I blame the Boy Scouts. Be prepared. And being prepared obviously means that you have to bring a bunch of stuff that you don't need just in case you happen to need it. So I overpack, because once an eagle, always an eagle. But when it comes to new life, the dead have no clue what they need. So we keep trying to bring up extra stuff. Jesus, do I need this dirt? This is all I have. Do I have this dirt? He says, no, it has no place here. Well, how about this death? I have death. No, that doesn't belong here either. Well, how about backbiting? No. How about complaining? No. And before you ask again, no, you don't need that either. Just take my hand and see. This is what Paul is telling the Colossians. But the good news is that we live, and we do not fall over dead when we were baptized. We get to learn to choose life over death. In light of Jesus rising from the dead, trampling down death by death, we see this life for what it is in Christ, a gestation period. Does that mean that this life is worthless and that we should go off ourselves so that we can be with God? No, it is good. God says as much in creation. This life is the only life where we get to choose to live. This life is the only life where God has made it so that we can choose to remain in the grave. This is the life where we train ourselves to look up for the hand of Jesus to raise us to where he is. So this life is not a bad life. But neither is it one that we have, when we have life offered to us, where we need to stay. Though the womb is a good place for a baby to grow while it grows, once it is time to be born, the womb is no longer a good place for it. So remember that after baptism, death has no place in life. Jesus won the victory over death by his death. The grave has no place in the land of life. Leave the grave to the dead and seek the things that are above, where Christ is, now and always. In the name of the Father, and the Son,